Chapter 4. The following morning arrived with a dull light that seeped through the curtains, soft but heavy enough to remind Alexandra that nothing about this day would be easy. He had barely slept again, just tossed from one corner of the bed to the other, replaying everything over and over. And now this foreign city where everything felt slightly tilted, unfamiliar and unpredictable. At 9:15 a.m. his phone buzzed. "Abzal, I have received your documents. Please come to the office as soon as you can." Alexandra didn't waste a second. He grabbed his coat double, checked that he had all the printed copies, and hurried towards his destination. The city outside was cold and pale, but this time he noticed the stirrings of morning life, street vendors opening stalls, people rushing toward work, the faint smell of freshly baked bread drifting between cars. It almost made him feel normal for a few seconds. The taxi dropped him outside Abzal's office, and Alexandra pushed through the door, feeling that same mix of urgency and dread tightening around his ribs. Abzal was already waiting inside the meeting room, surrounded by files all across the table, neatly arranged, color-coded tabs marking sections. The man looked up, motioned for Alexandra to sit. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Abzal said, "and for sending the documents, they were essential." Alexandra bowed, pulling out a chair. "Did you go through them?" "Yes." Abzal opened the topmost folder. "We now have enough to initiate legal action." Something in him eased slightly. Abzal continued, "I have drafted 2 motions. One for custody enforcement, which demands the court acknowledge your parental rights, and a second requesting parental access." "And that means?" Alexandra asked. "Meaning the court will be required to arrange a structured meeting between you and Max," Abzal explained. "Or at least question why such access would be denied. Custody may take time, but access is harder to ignore." Alexandra nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Good, I can't go this long without seeing him." Abzal rested both hands on the folder. "But I need you to understand something important before we proceed." Alexandra braced himself. "This will not be a straightforward case," Abzal said calmly. "You are a foreign father, she is a Kazakh mother with extended family here. The courts will lean toward preserving the cultural and social environment of the child." "I don't want to take him from her," Alexandra said quietly. "I want shared custody. What we already had, he deserves both parents." "That may be so," Abzal said, "but the court will question why she believed it was necessary to leave the country. Her lawyer will build a narrative perhaps about family support, stability, or anything that feeds their narrative. They will shape it carefully." "And the fact that she took him without telling me?" Alexandra asked. "The fact that she blocked me?" "It will matter," Abzal assured him, "but not as much as you might expect." Alexandra leaned back. "Because I'm not from here." "Because you are not from here," Abzal confirmed. "And because, to them, your presence in his life is more abstract, something written in documents but not rooted in their country. They do not know you, they do not see you. That impacts decisions more than it should." Alexandra rubbed his eyes. "So what now?" Abzal handed him 2 documents. "You must sign both petitions. Once filed, the court will issue notices. Within a week or 2, they will request Layla's presence and yours. They will ask for her local address. It will allow us to confirm where she is living. And once we have her location, we can argue for parental access. We can insist you be allowed to see Max." He shook again, slowly, grounding himself. Abzal's tone turned softer but firm now. "Mr. Varen, I want to be clear with you. You are doing the right thing. Following the law is your strongest position, but you must prepare emotionally. This will not be resolved quickly, and it will not be resolved fairly at every step." Alexandra stared at the table for a long moment. "I just want him safe." "I know," Abzal replied, "and that is why we proceed." Alexandra lifted his pen and signed both motions. Abzal gathered the documents, stamped them with the firm's seal, and placed them in a large envelope. "I will file these today," Abzal said. "Once the court accepts them, we begin the waiting." "How long?" 10 to 14 days for the first hearing," Abzal replied. "Depending on the judge assigned, some are efficient. Others, well, not so much. And in the meantime," Abzal hesitated, "in the meantime we continue investigating." We see what we can learn about Layla's family, her connections, and her living situation here. The more information we gather, the better we can prepare. Alexandra shook, though his stomach tightened. And if the court delays things, it will, Abzal said honestly. They always do, especially with cases involving foreigners. Alexandra exhaled tightly, bracing himself. Abzal closed the folder. You must stay calm, Mr. Varen. Impulsive behavior will weaken your position. We will do this methodically. Alexandra forced a small nod. I'll try. Abzal offered him a faint, sympathetic smile. Good, now go back to your hotel, rest and wait for my call. I'll update you once the documents are accepted. Alexandra stood, shook the lawyer's hand, and went outside into the cold Almaty air. Filing the motions didn't bring Max home. But it was the first real step, the first action that made this nightmare feel less daunting and more like something he could fight. He pulled his coat tighter, took a deep breath and whispered to himself, Hold on, Max, I'm coming. 2 weeks passed like a slow, suffocating fog. Every day Alexandra woke with the same ache in his chest, checking his phone for updates from Abzal, refreshing his email obsessively, pacing the hotel room more than he breathed. Each morning he waited for the call from the court, some sort of confirmation that the motions had been accepted, the hearing scheduled. Finally, on a cold Wednesday afternoon, Abzal called, Mr. Varen, the court has assigned your case, the hearing is scheduled for Friday. The next 2 days dragged on. Alexandra barely slept. He walked around the city aimlessly, past street markets, quiet parks, small cafes, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He imagined Max sleeping somewhere in this city, walking down these streets being tucked in by someone else. The thought alone made his throat close, when Friday arrived. Alexandra dressed carefully in hopes of seeing Max after so long. Abzal met him outside the courthouse, a grey concrete structure that looked more like an administrative block than a place where fate was decided. Stay calm, Abzal said as they walked in. They will watch everything, your tone, your reactions, even how you look at Layla. Alexandra dipped stiffly. I just want to see my son. And you will, Abzal replied, but only briefly. Inside, the block smelled like paper and dust. People sat on hard wooden benches, hushed voices echoing off the cold stone walls. Alexandra recognized none of the faces until he did. At the far end of the corridor stood Layla. He almost didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun, face pale, posture stiff. Beside her were 2 older men and a woman, clearly family. Their expressions hardened instantly when they saw Alexandra, as if he were a stranger intruding. But Alexandra didn't look at them, because next to Layla there he was, Max. He was standing silently, holding a small backpack, his hair a bit longer, wearing a jacket Alexandra didn't buy. He looked thinner, pale, his eyes scanning the hallway with the same curious innocence until they landed on his papa. The moment their eyes met, Alexandra's body moved without thought. He stepped forward, breath catching in his throat. Max, he whispered, voice breaking. But Layla blocked him immediately, stepping in front of the boy. No speaking, she snapped. Not now, Alexandra froze. Max's small face peeked from behind her leg, confused, startled, unsure. Layla, Alexandra said softly, forcing calm into his voice, please let me just say. No, her tone was flat, cold, rehearsed. You have no right. Actually, Abzal interjected calmly, he does. He is the father. A greeting is not prohibited. Layla lifted her chin but didn't move. One of the older men stepped closer, tall, broad-shouldered, his expressions stern. You can speak after this, the man muttered. Not now. Alexandra's jaw tightened in restraint. Max shuffled slightly, opening his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but Layla's hand tightened on his arm. Abzal touched Alexandra's elbow. It's time, let's go inside. They entered the courtroom, a modest room with wooden chairs, a raised judge's bench, and a small table for each party. The judge, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, glanced up briefly before looking down at the files on his desk. The hearing began. An interpreter stood beside the judge, a young woman flipping through her notes. Alexandra felt a moment of unease the moment she spoke. Her English was decent, but something about her tone made him wary. Abzal began with introductions, submitting the necessary documents including birth certificate, custody agreements, proof of shared parenting. But almost immediately the judge frowned. "These documents, where is the certified copy?" the interpreter translated. "That is the certified copy," Abzal replied calmly. "Stamped by the county court." The judge murmured something. The interpreter hesitated, then said, "He says this looks unofficial, it may be incomplete." "Incomplete," Abzal repeated, taken aback. "Impossible, everything is here." Alexandra watched, heart sinking, as the judge pushed the papers aside indifferently. Layla's lawyer, a confident man with a polished suit, stood next. His voice was smooth, controlled. "My client removed the child for his safety," the interpreter translated. "She believed the father was unstable and the environment was unhealthy." Alexandra's head snapped up. "That's not true." Abzal placed a firm hand on his arm. "Wait. I will respond." The lawyer continued, now passing documents to the judge, a stack much thicker than what Alexandra had brought. "She claims," the interpreter said, "that the father neglected emotional needs and placed excessive pressure on the child. She has statements from her relatives confirming this." "What relatives?" Alexandra whispered, stunned. "Who? They barely knew Max." Abzal's voice remained calm. "We will address that," but the judge was already nodding slowly. Then the interpreter added something that made Alexandra stiffen. "She says the father threatened to take the child away." "What?" Alexandra whispered. "That never happened." "Not even once." "I know," Abzal said firmly. "We will contest that." When it was Alexandra's turn to speak, he took a deep breath. "I love my son," he said steadily. "I've always been part of his life. I have never harmed him. I have never abandoned him. Layla took him without warning, without permission." The interpreter cut in, speaking rapidly in Russian. The judge's brows furrowed. Alexandra watched the exchange helplessly. He had no idea what version of his words was being delivered, or how they were being perceived. When Abzal tried to present evidence of joint custody, the judge asked for verification of authenticity. When he submitted proof of school enrollment, the judge said it was not relevant. When Alexandra insisted he needed parental access, the judge replied through the interpreter that more time was needed. Every request was delayed. Every point was questioned. Every paper Alexandra brought seemed to vanish into the judge's growing pile of pending review documents. Layla, meanwhile, sat perfectly still, eyes downcast, hands folded neatly, family flanking her like a shield. After nearly 2 hours, the hearing ended with no decision. No access, no timeline, nothing. The judge simply said, "The court requires further examination. A ruling will come later." As Alexandra walked out of the courtroom, his hands trembled with frustration, confusion, and fear. 2 weeks of waiting brought no changes, except one thing. He had finally seen his son and lost him again in the same moment. The hall outside the courtroom felt colder than the courtroom itself. The moment the heavy doors shut behind them, Alexandra leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. His heartbeat hadn't slowed since he saw Max's face. The confusion, the hesitation, the flicker of recognition before Layla pulled him away. It stayed carved into his mind like a bruise. Abzal stood beside him, adjusting the folders under his arm, composed as always, though even he looked strained. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Let's go to my office." Alexandra followed him out of the courthouse and into the late afternoon chill. They walked the short block to Abzal building in silence, Alexandra's thoughts trapped between anger and disbelief. By the time they reached the office, he felt as if every ounce of energy had been wrung out of him. Inside, Abzal closed the door gently and gestured for him to sit. Alexandra didn't, he paced. "That was insane," he said under his breath. "Every single thing I said was twisted. Half of what Layla said wasn't even true." How could the judge? Abzal held up a hand. "Sit, please." Alexandra forced himself into the chair across from him, gripping the armrests. Abzal placed the hearing folder on the desk. "I am going to explain what happened today," he said calmly, "and I need you to listen without reacting emotionally. This will be difficult to hear, but it is necessary." Alexandra bobbed stiffly. Abzal folded his hands. "Firstly, Layla's accusations." None of them were true, Alexandra said immediately. Not one. I never threatened to take Max away, I never. I know, Abzal said. But the truth matters less than the story she is building. Alexandra blinked in confusion. The story, Abzal dipped. She knew exactly what she was doing today. Those accusations were not random or emotional, they were strategic. Strategic, Alexandra repeated bitterly. Yes, Abzal leaned back. Layla understands this system better than you do. She knows that Kazakh courts prioritize the mother, especially a local mother, and especially one who claims she is protecting her child. Alexandra stared at him. So she lied because she knows she'll be believed. Yes, Abzal didn't soften it. They were crafted to make you look unstable, foreign, unpredictable. She needs to show the court that bringing Max here was a protective decision, not an act of abduction. Alexandra shook his head slowly, anger simmering under his skin. The presence of her whole family further reinforces her narrative, Abzal said. Their presence suggests to the judge that Max has a stable family network here. That gives them weight and influence. Alexandra let out a long, frustrated breath. So, she's building a case based on complete fabrication. She is building a narrative judged by local standards, Abzal corrected gently, and those standards tend to favor her. Alexandra buried his face in his hands. I don't understand, why go to these lengths, why take him here, why hide him, why do all this? Abzal hesitated for a moment before answering. Sometimes, he said carefully, parents believe they can offer a better environment, or they want to be the primary figure in the child's life. Or they use cultural advantage when they know it exists. You think she did this for custody? Alexandra asked slowly. It is one possibility, Abzal said. She may genuinely fear losing relevance in Max's life. She may have been influenced by her family. Or she may have convinced herself that Max is better here, where she has support and familiarity. He paused, but the timing, the secrecy, the manipulation, yes. It aligns with someone who wants to shift custody in her favor. Alexandra was silent for a long moment. So, what do we do now? Abzal opened the file again. We prepare for the next hearing. We gather more documentation. We challenge the misinterpretations. We highlight inconsistencies in her story. And the access petition, Alexandra asked. The lawyer exhaled. They delayed it, didn't deny it, it is common. Because I'm foreign, Alexandra muttered. Because the court will always protect local family structures first, Abzal agreed. But we keep pushing. I will file an urgent request for parental access again. We need to insist. Alexandra closed his eyes. I just need to see him, talk to him. And we will fight for that, Abzal said firmly. But Alexandra, you must understand. This is not only a legal battle now, it is a cultural and political one. You are fighting an entire system, not just one parent. Alexandra swallowed hard. I'll do whatever it takes. I know, Abzal said, but there is something else. Alexandra looked up. You must be careful, Abzal said quietly. Layla's relatives were quite attentive today. Their body language, their positioning, they are not neutral observers. Alexandra frowned. What are you implying? That they may try to intimidate you, Abzal said plainly, or monitor you, discourage your actions. It happens more often than you think. A chill ran up Alexandra's spine. After the meeting, Abzal walked him to the door, giving final instructions about documents and next steps. Alexandra thanked him, stepped out onto the street. The air was thick with tension and confusion. Across the road, leaning against a parked car, stood the same older man who blocked him in the block earlier. His arms were crossed. His gaze firm and unblinking. Farther down, another man, younger, taller, pretended to check his phone, but his eyes kept flicking upward towards Alexandra. Neither moved or spoke. They simply watched. Alexandra's pulse tightened. He forced himself to walk normally down the street, though every instinct screamed at him to look back, to confront, to test his limits. He didn't. He kept going until he turned a corner. Only then did he exhale. It wasn't paranoia. This was actually happening, all of it, and it was only the beginning.